thanks so much for joining me and joining us here in Hong Kong.
Thank you.
I wanted to start by asking you how you managed to make your company cool. Because we just heard you managed to
Payments is
make
really cool.
a lot of money. But not only are you doing payments, but you're also not doing the kind of Apple Pay wave and it looks like magic payments. You're doing this sort of back-end infrastructure payments that have become incredibly popular.
Yep.
Whenever I go to a launch of another buy button, it's always powered by Stripe.
Yep.
But how did you manage to create that kind of brand?
I don't think it's so much that Stripe is cool, so much as starting a startup is really cool right now. And we've seen, even over the past kind of 5 or 10 years, the amount that you can do as a small startup team really explode. And before Stripe, the reason we started Stripe was because everything you need to build a product is getting better at a really fast rate. We have awesome web hosting tools and software development frameworks and everything like this. But the tools available to at least us when we were starting it to build an internet business really sucked. And I think nobody had, all the payment companies before Stripe were very much focused on, the large enterprises. They were very much focused on the business people. No one was focused on the developers, the entrepreneurs, the people actually building the products that we're all kind of talking about here today. And I think if Stripe did anything different, that's the part that we did differently.
Yeah, so it's like there was a cool community of startup people who really wanted something that you were able to provide. So you got some kudos too.
Yeah, and I think those startups and those tech companies were where a huge amount of the change was coming from, right? And they were really underserved.
So I know you don't really like talking about the $5 billion valuation. So let's approach your fundraising from a different angle. You had a strategic partnership with Visa, right?
Yep.
What does that mean? You also have another partnership or investment from Amex. Mm-hmm. What's your relationship like with these kind of big, old, traditional payments companies?
Yep. The vast majority of Stripes, of kind of the payments that Stripe enable, still run through credit cards. We're starting to expand, and especially as we look to new regions like Latin America or Southeast Asia, we're starting to look at other payment instruments like Alipay or like direct debit through bank accounts, things like that. But the vast majority of payments we power today are through credit cards, and we expect that to be the case for quite a while still. You have to remember that in a lot of markets, they're totally dominant as a payment instrument. But the experience of buying something online with a credit card for a long time it's not been great, right? And you're, manually entering your details, handling security and fraud is hard for merchants. There are all these issues with it. And so we both kind of respect the incredible scale of the credit card companies. We think there's a lot that could be done better. And so this is what the Stripe and Visa partnership is about. It's about working with them on better buying experiences. It's about working with them on increasing Stripe's global coverage and stuff like that.
Have these companies tried to buy you?
People ask occasionally, and we've been very consistent from the beginning that we're building Stripe as an independent company, and we like doing that.
And so one of your big projects at the moment is expanding in Asia. Mm-hmm. How's that going? And what are the differences between trying to build a payments company in the West and in Asia?
It's going well. I'm excited about it. So for context, up to this year, we had not begun really. Now we have a private beta underway in Japan. We have a private beta underway in Singapore, and there's a few more countries that we're actively working on. I think one of the big things, if you're serving online businesses as we are, that you have to look at is the buying patterns and browsing patterns of consumers, and specifically the how dominant the kind of the mobile-only browsing model is here. So in the US, we're still dealing with a huge legacy of the fact that because there are so many successful desktop desktop companies, it's now a shift from desktop to mobile in the US. In a lot of parts of Asia, it's just going straight to mobile. One of the my favorite stats that I discovered recently is that between 2010 and 2015, the number of people in Asia who use a mobile device as their sole computing device went from 3 million to 420 million. So a 100x increase in Asia alone. And so, and you can see this in a lot of the big successful internet companies. Their dominant interaction model is solely on the mobile phone, like WeChat or something like that. And so, as we look at it, we expect to see that a very large number of successful businesses will be built by moving consumer consumption patterns to mobile. So, spend that you previously had offline is now going to be happening on a mobile device. And in contrast to a lot of the successful desktop companies in the US of maybe 10 years ago, eBay or Craigslist in the US, they were successful at enabling commerce, but they didn't actually take part in the commerce at all. In contrast, we think the mobile companies in Asia over the next 10 years are going to use payments as a very core part of their product. And we see this already with a lot of the successful mobile companies like Uber or Grab Taxi or even WeChat, right? They've integrated payments deeply into the product and use that to make the product better. And so, one of our favorite stats is that right now about 2% of global consumer spending happens online. That's crazy, right? You would expect it to be 30% or 50% or 70%, definitely not 2%. And so as that spend moves from 2% upwards, we think that's going to be driven by a huge number of, startups here in Asia serving, their local country or serving the region or kind of acting globally, and that's why we're moving here.
And so how different is the competitive landscape for you here? Who are your big rivals?
I think it's somewhat similar to the competitive landscape in the US, right? Where there are some, large global players like PayPal and people like that, and then there are the more traditional merchant banks who you might have had to go through for internet payments.
And what about Alipay or LinePay? Are these people who are potential partners, or are they rivals?
Well, Alipay isn't a potential partner; they're a current partner of ours.
What do you do with them then?
Right. So one of the important things about Stripe and our approach has been we're not building a mobile wallet or anything like that. We're building a neutral platform for merchants to accept payments. So if you're building an app, if you're building the next Grab Taxi or the next Airbnb or something like that, you can use Stripe to accept payments from your customers and run an online business and do so not just here in the region, but do so globally. To do that, and especially the globally part, you probably need to be thinking about more than just credit cards as you expand to new countries. And so if you want to sell to Chinese consumers, for example, Visa and MasterCard just won't cut it because they're less than 10% of the population there. And so that's why we partnered with Alipay, where we said, if you are a merchant in one of the regions that Stripe supports, like the US or Europe or Australia, you can sell not only to people who have credit cards, but you can sell to Chinese consumers through Alipay. We expect to do more of those partnerships. So maybe I'll buttonhole Takeshi from Lion, as he makes his way on stage.
Yeah, I'm seeing him later. And you talk about being really neutral and not trying to create a mobile wallet. But how did you feel when Apple started to move into payments? Because for a lot of industries, Apple moving into their turf is a bit scary.
Yeah. No, the news of Apple Pay was great and continues to be. So, for context, people generally use Apple Pay with Stripe, and so actually a majority of the apps that in the App Store that support Apple Pay for in-app purchases are powered by Stripe. And we just think one of the biggest barriers to increasing mobile commerce is getting consumers over the hump, right? You can actually see this behavior because, certainly in many Western countries in the US, the vast majority of browsing time is on mobile, but the vast majority of actually completing transactions of purchasing is still on desktop for a lot of companies. And so consumers, browse on mobile, and then they say, too much work, I won't bother, I won't buy it, and they go back to their desktop computer to finish it. And you can see why, because if you have to, again, type in all the details again and again and again on a tiny screen, it's crazy, it's cumbersome. And so Apple launched Apple Pay, where they are handling the entire brokering of the transaction. You just authenticate with your thumb, and now you can buy. I mean, for us, that's amazing, because so many more mobile commerce companies can be built. Google is doing similarly with Android Pay. We think that's going to be really big. But in general, anything that lowers the barriers for consumers, in turn makes it easier to build a mobile commerce company and kind of increases their chances of success.
So this kind of big rise of mobile commerce is great for the consumer. It means I can, buy my shoes on the train or whatever it is I want to do.
And I'll say, by the way, I think we're already seeing new interaction models as a result of it, where we've partnered with a few of the social networks in the US, Twitter, Pinterest, and some more coming.
Facebook, aren't you?
We work with Facebook on different stuff. So anyway, Twitter and Pinterest, what they're doing is they're letting you buy directly on the platform. And and a big part of what lets them do this and what lets this be successful is Apple Pay. It's the fact that they're not already a commerce company, but it's much easier for them to become a commerce company, thanks to companies like Stripe and Apple Pay. And so I think we'll see more of this, where business models that were not possible before, such as purchasing directly within a social feed, become possible with all the changes we're seeing.
How does a retailer adapt to that? Because they could often lose the relationship they have with their customers if I buy on Pinterest rather than from Macy's.
Yep. So I don't have a prescription. I think the one thing that we can see from all the previous technological shifts is that there's a cartoon I saw a while back where it's like a bunch of executives of a big business sitting around a boardroom and saying, why don't we just go back to our old strategy of hoping the internet doesn't continue? And I think there's a little bit like that among some companies. And that strategy...
Still, though, I mean,
yes,
that's amazing.
That strategy has been shown not to work. And so... retailers do need to look at, what the new interaction models are and what we expect to see in the future. But they just can't keep doing everything the way they have been doing it. And I think, for example, one interesting thing to notice for me is that it wasn't the existing offline retailers who kind of won the emergence of the internet. It was, internet-specific retailers like Amazon, like Rakuten, like Flipkart, all these companies. And now we're seeing in a lot of countries a shift from desktop to mobile. I think there'll be another similar shift where you have an opportunity for all these new mobile-specific companies to crop up. And it's not entirely obvious to me that it'll be the same companies again who win. I mean, even you look at some examples, like I think eBay is a very kind of desktop-y company, and they have not done great at adapting to mobile. I think we'll see other examples like that.
Yeah, I used to buy all my clothes on eBay when I was like 14, but
not
so much anymore.
On the beige Dell computer in the corner of the living room, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, at school. But the other big trend we're seeing in commerce is there's sort of the rise of the marketplace, and I was wondering, from a startup's point of view, the rise of marketplaces and crowdfunding and all those things, do you think that makes it easier to start a startup anywhere in the world? Or is there still a huge value to being in the valley where there's lots and lots of money?
So I think there's two trends going on in parallel. One is it's pretty clear that the amount of leverage that small teams have is increasing as time goes on. And so, Instagram was 8 people when they were bought by Facebook. And, there are all these examples of very, very small teams building wildly successful products or wildly successful businesses, and in a way that just wouldn't have been possible 10 or 20 years ago. I think that trend will continue. And so the amount of impact that, 4 or 8 very talented people in Hong Kong or in, Tel Aviv or in Melbourne or wherever can have, that continues to increase. And we're seeing, there's a plethora of examples of very successful internet companies being started all around the world. And so, if your worldview is, you have to be in Silicon Valley to build a successful tech company, then you have to explain Skype and Spotify and Waze and, all these companies. In concert to that, I think we're seeing a very large number of mobile marketplaces spring up all over, right? And so you look at food delivery, you look at transport, you look at travel, you look at all these areas. We now have Grab Taxi and Didi and Uber and all these companies. And there, it's at least for now still somewhat regional, right? And so it's players here in Asia that have, a very large chunk of the ride-sharing market in Asia. Same with food delivery, things like that. And so I think one of the exciting things is that as we see these new interaction models emerge, it does not seem to be the case that we're just going to have, a single company globally dominating it. It seems like there is room and will continue to be room for a whole number of players that take into account the kind of the different regional nuances. And I'm very curious to see where that goes.
It's a bit of a warning for Travis at Uber. He may not be the king of ride sharing all over the world.
Well, I mean, we have to see how it plays out, right? It's still, we're 5 years into the ride sharing space, and there's like a ton more time to go in it, and everyone's talking about what happens when self-driving cars come along. Is that good or bad? But certainly, it is empirically not the case today that one ride-sharing company owns everything.
No, definitely not, and that's sometimes what it feels like in the Valley, but not here. So this $5 billion valuation of yours now puts you very firmly in unicorn territory, which is the term that is being adopted in Silicon Valley for any startup which is over $1 billion. I just have this feeling that being a unicorn is not a very Irish thing to be. Do people give you a lot of stick for it at home? Being Ireland, you get a healthy amount of teasing, but I think we're fairly happy with how Stripe has gone to date. That's a brilliant Irish understatement for you there. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you.